And for any of you doubters there, any of you conspiracy theorists who have not believed in global warming and climate change, we finally have the evidence that's going to convince you. Big Dunk Ferguson has said the Earth is warming up, isn't it? And if you want to argue with him, go for it. I wouldn't want to argue with him. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory, and I'm joined by my very good friend,
Adam. Hey, Rory. How are you? More importantly, mate, how's your week been so far?
Yeah, good week. Not much football on this midweek, so I kind of had a few nights off. I have watched highlights, don't worry, listeners, but I've had a few nights off from football because even myself need a bit of a rest at times and, watch Catfish with the missus and have a bit of a normal TV, if you know what I mean. But yeah, not a bad week. Looking forward to this weekend. It kind of weather's getting a bit better in Milan, so yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
How's your week been, mate?
It's been good. Work's been quite hectic. It's been very busy, like extremely busy. But like you say, I've kind of been a bit lost with the lack of football. But then it's also, as you say, it's been quite nice. And I think we've not even had much in the way of transfer kind of rumors, which is kind of what I think we'll talk about later in the show. But yeah, I do feel a bit lost in this window. It feels like something will be brewing, but it'd probably be like a mad scramble for like the last day or two. It does feel like that's going to happen, right?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a calm before the storm. I think there's a lot of teams kind of gearing up and trying to see what everyone else is doing. We're going to get into it. We've got Arsenal and Chelsea kind of getting this grudge now in the transfer market of who's going to blink first, and only Chelsea wanting the players we go after. So it's kind of, I think there's a lot of teams trying to size each other up. It's all Premier League pretty much. We're going to get onto that as well. The massive imbalance, what's happening. But yeah, it kind of feels like I think this transfer deadline day could be a big one. Lots of last minute big moves. I think there's still a lot of clubs that haven't done a lot of business, like Manchester United haven't done a lot. Liverpool are seemingly not going to do anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if something comes through the door. Yeah, there's still quite a few teams to make their first move, so it shall be interesting. Spurs finally backing Conte, it looks like, or starting to try and back Conte. More or less trying to look like they are backing Conte maybe is a better way to do it. But yeah, it should be an interesting transfer deadline day. We will be there to discuss it the Friday afterwards. I can't remember. Is it a Tuesday deadline day? It's Wednesday, isn't it?
Wednesday.
Is it Wednesday the 1st?
Wednesday first, I think so.
Wednesday. Nice. We will be there. But in this show this week, we are going to be talking about quickly Carabao Cup action. We're going to be talking a midweek destruction in Rome in Serie as Milan's woes continue. We're going to be talking transfer business, and then we're going to be previewing the weekend as we've got FA Cup action, including Arsenal against Manchester City on Friday night, and a big weekend in Serie A, including Il Derby della Sole between Roma and Napoli. So big things to look forward to. But before we go in, I've got a question for you, Adam. As FIFA have seemingly brought in the Todd Bowley rule, meaning that you can now maximum offer 5-year contracts to players to stop anti-amortization tactics.
Right, yeah.
If you could bring in one rule to target one club specifically, what would it be, and what club are you targeting?
I'm going to target PSG, and my rule would be for every player that they buy, they have to sell one immediately.
Oh, nice. I like it. I like it. Yes, very good. They can't hoover up all of Ligue 1's talent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just create that balance, right? And it means they can't create that desired squad either at the same time.
Yeah. No more fantasy football. No more fantasy
Yes.
football in Paris. I've had a quick think about it, and my rule is going to be a team that I really despise, but don't talk about that much because they're not in the Premier League anymore, is Stoke City. So I'm going to introduce a rule where they can not sign a player over 6 foot and they can't pass the ball further than 10 yards. And see if the locals still enjoy the football. I know it's technically 2 rules, but I'm going to impose that rule on Stoke City. No players over 6 foot, no passes over 10 yards. Let's see total football at the Britannia. Let's see if it works, right?
Well, I think Nathan Jones tried and died by that sword, but yeah. Let's give it a try.
Let's force him to have another go. Let's force him to have another go. So, listeners, we are going to take a quick break. After that, we are going to discuss all the midweek action. See you there.
Hi, my name is Dimi Konstantopoulos, and you're listening to the Anglo-Italian podcast.
And here we are. It's time for the Euro midweek review. Not much football this week, not much to talk about, but there's a little bit. I think we're going to start. Should we start in Italy or start in England? I think Italy's got the bigger headlines, right?
Yeah. Certo.
So I'm trying to remember, Tuesday night, or was it last night? Tuesday night. It was Tuesday night. Lazio absolutely demolish Milan 4-0 to continue this, what is turning into a pretty bad run of form for the Rossoneri. 4-0 to Lazio. We saw Sarri ball starting to click. We're seeing it a bit more. We're seeing flashes of it. Yeah. If they can get that consistency. But Adam, how convincing was this win? Let's talk about Lazio before we just tear into Milan.
Yeah, and we will tear into Milan. But yeah, incredible performance. I mean, I didn't expect that kind of demolition. I think I was expecting Milan to have a bit more fight, but I mean, Zaccagni, Pedro even, Sergej Milinkovic-Savic actually getting a goal was kind of a big story in itself. I appreciate it was within 3 minutes, but even so, that was just incredible. And if you look at the form for like Lazio, it definitely seems like it's in their favour at the moment. But just everything about the way Lazio played was just superb. They were solid at the back. They're combative in the midfields. And in the final third, they just looked like electric. They just looked like they were going to damage Milan further. And the likes of Simon Kjaer looks just like scared. He just literally looks like an old man that can't keep up with the pace. But didn't help, some of the other players around him just stood there, didn't really do much. And it is a worry for Pioli. There's been a lot of calls about trying to change his formation because he's stuck with this kind of religious formation of, it's like a 4-2-3-1 essentially, but it's not working. It's like they're toothless up top. They're really poor at the back. They're very porous in that sense. But also in the central midfield, is like, if you talk about the likes of Tonali, Benacer, for example, and then whoever then comes in, for example, they're just not doing a solid enough job. And that's one of the points that I was going to call out. But let's stick with Lazio for a second. I just think they are cementing that kind of top 4 place now. It does feel like as long as they don't do what they normally do, which is kind of sometimes wobble when it comes to these kind of crunch games, I think they've got a good chance. I mean, what did you think of Lazio first?
I thought we saw, like I kind of alluded to, we saw more of the flashes of Sarri ball consistently across 90 minutes, and I think the really quick, intricate passing patterns, the fast pace, like Milan were definitely there for the taking, but I think we saw Lazio really showing what they're capable of, and I think if they can hit that more consistently and hit that height, then they can definitely secure this top 4 place. Now, obviously, the top 4 race in Serie A at the minute is very, very close. We've got Atalanta in 6th on 35 points, Roma 5th, 37, Inter 4th, 37, Lazio 3rd, 37, Milan 2nd, 38. So all of those teams could drop out or go in, right? That is going to be a super, if if there might not be a title race in Serie A this year, the interesting bit is going to see, one, if Napoli don't fuck it up, but also who actually gets those 3 top 4 spots, because it's going to be so close. I think all those teams have to play each other again, because we're now officially into the second half of the season. So there's going to be a lot of swings and roundabouts in this race, I think. But Lazio are definitely in the fight. They just need to get that a little bit consistency. But we have to say, like you said, Milinkovic-Savic, he's one of the best midfielders in the league. It kind of feels like he had his head turned for a bit of this season. It doesn't feel like he was really, we weren't seeing him, right? I hope that for Lazio's sake, that Sarri has kind of managed to, convince him that, like, he is who that team should be built around. He is who that team is kind of built around. And if they can improve everyone else around him, he's good enough to take that team wherever it needs to go. Like, so I think, I really hope Sarri is able to kind of get the best out of him and continue to get the best out of him. Felipe Anderson coming back from West Ham, I thought he was honestly done after West Ham. I thought this is a player who's lost interest. He's put on about 2 stone. He's like lost the love of the game. And I think just he's happy in Rome. He's happy at Lazio. And he's been great for them this season. Zaccagni, we've talked about, just banging goals in. Luis Alberto has kind of been in and out of the team, been on the bench a few games, coming off the bench. I think if they can, again, get him into the team, get him in form, he's a great player as well. So promising signs for Lazio, definitely promising signs. And I think and we're going to get onto them now, but with like Milan and Inter kind of dropping off, massively dropping off, Lazio have got to be there to take advantage. Roma have got to be there to take advantage, because if these teams kind of wake up and find their form again, then they do have better squads than Lazio. They have been consistently better across the past. So Lazio need to take advantage of this opportunity, I think. But Milan, that first goal, the ball goes past about 5 Milan players, and none of them move for it. Like there was, I know, like I think maybe 2 of them are facing their own goal, so you're not just going to put your foot through it. But
no, of course, but
put
still
a foot on it, but do
make
something
an effort
to try and disrupt the run of that ball. It goes straight through. Milinkovic-Savic, unmarked, late run, strokes it into the bottom corner. It was like they just wanted to hit pause on their defenders. They all just stood there, and like the ball just rolled through. And I think even the tackle from Kalulu to give away the penalty was super lazy. Like all of the defending was just really static, massively out of position. And like I know that like the goalkeeper Tatarashanu, all the Milan fans are ready to kill him now, but like it seems like Maignan not being there is massive. The defense isn't able to be as organized, and you can see like the nervousness when I was watching it. What I thought was like, oh, this reminds me of when Arsenal had like Mustafi and Socrates at the back and stuff, and there'd be like one mistake, and then all of a sudden everyone would be terrified of making the next mistake. So then another mistake would happen because you're thinking about it too much. And that's I was watching that Milan defensive performance. I was like, oh, I've seen this. I've seen this so many times. Like they all just looked petrified and confused and unable to change what was happening. Like where do you think the biggest issues were for Milan?
I really don't know what is triggering this kind of form at the moment, because as you rightly allude to, they've conceded quite a lot of goals. I mean, up until that Lazio game, it was already 9 goals in the first 5. So you add those 4 goals, it's now 13 goals in the space of 6 games, which is basically 2 goals a game. And I was just looking at opinions, and everyone's kind of basically pinpointing it towards Pioli, which he has got his faults. We've called it out in the past on this pod around sometimes his man management hasn't been spot on, but it almost feels like since that Roma, it feels like a defeat. I said it almost like was a defeat then, but it was a draw. When they were conceding those 2 quick goals, because don't forget, it was 86th minute where they were leading 2-0. From that moment onwards, it feels like the confidence levels have just completely evaporated from that squad. Defensively, they just don't look assured like they were last season. Like last season, even if they went a goal behind, there was always that feeling that they would get a goal. They didn't care. It was a bit like, when Arsenal went behind against Man United, there was always that confidence. Doesn't matter, we'll still get it, because it was always that confidence level with them. But with this Milan squad, it just doesn't feel like they've got even the personnel. It almost feels like that. And like I alluded to, Chiara doesn't look like the same player from last season. Giroud is another one because he has not scored since we were talking offline about this. This was the game that you last went to see.
I was in the stadium.
At the San Siro, which was against Spezia in November last year, which kind of says it all. But also, Rory, just before I let you get in, this is the worst run Pioli has had at AC Milan since he's taken over.
Well, I think he's been he was an interesting manager because when he first came in, people were saying like he wasn't good enough for the job. Who is this guy? And I was amongst them. I was like, who the hell is this guy? What's he doing?
Yeah,
he was quietly doing, but he was quietly doing a good job. And then he's like obviously won them the Scudetto. And I think actually when you look across his time, he has done very well at Milan. This is the first rough patch he's hit, and it'll be interesting to see if he can get through it. Quickly, do you think he can get through it?
I think they'll give him time. And the reason I say that is because I think they appreciate that there needs to be an evolution at the club, but it's quite evident that they haven't got the funds. And this is another thing that I wanted to allude to is in the summer, they spent 35.5 million. I don't know on what though, because when I talk about these players, right, Charles de Ketelaere was the biggest one at 28 million. He's only had 1 assist and no goals in 1,005 minutes in total that he's contributed. Just to talk about the others, Origi is another one, came in on a free. So that's, I suppose, nothing lost, but that's 1 goal, 1 assist. That's it across 579 minutes of play. You've got like Sergino Dest, who was supposed to be that kind of bombarding right back, has not contributed a single assist or goal so far, 632 minutes. They've bought some talent from Germany. So you got Marcel Thiaw, who is looking like the kind of maybe replacement of Kia. He's only played 123 minutes. Again, no like assists or goals in that time. Frank, who's the Belgium midfielder, 153 minutes, just 1 assist. That's 1.7 million from Wolfsburg. They just don't seem inspiring. And I thought, let me just have a look at Inter, who we've also been critical of. They have spent 2.7 million.
And they owe how much?
Yes, there is that. But if you look at the quality of players they got in, so Acerbi, okay, he's not the greatest, but he's
been better than I thought he'd be. He's definitely been better than I thought he'd be.
He's a better standard player for Serie A club. Okay, Raul Bellanova, he's a player that I'd say has got potential. He needs game time, probably not at the right club for it.
No,
but I don't know.
You're not getting past any of those wing backs, really.
Onana, I think, was a clever bit of business on a free transfer, so that's a real good one because he's now cementing his place. Aslani's starting to come into it. He's only on loan as well, believe it or not. Lukaku, we know what about Lukaku.
Moving on.
Mkhitaryan, again, free transfer from Roma. He's contributed this season. He's done quite well. So if you look at that kind of level of business, then
these are two
Milan done.
But these are two clubs that have very different philosophies because
this is true.
I think Inter are very much the let's not think, and this is the history of their club, is let's not think beyond our nose. Like they don't do long-term planning.
No.
So even like Zaniolo, who we're going to talk about, just blindly give him away in a trade deal for a player who's 35 and smokes 20 fags a day, like whatever it is. Like they don't do long-term planning, but what they do is they bring in players who can do a job now, and they do that pretty well. So you're right with Mkhitaryan and like, the players they brought in, Dzeko even was just a thing of like, this guy's going to get us goals now. He was
written off as well.
Yeah,
he
might only have 3 years left in him, but he can do a job now. And I think that's Milan's philosophy. That's Inter's philosophy. With Milan, their philosophy has openly been, we are going to buy players young, develop them, like achieve stuff with them, and then sell them to the Premier League, right? That's kind of the tactic. And that's going to take patience. That's going to take... Some of the players are going to take longer than others to bed in. Some of the players are going to hit the ground running. You're like, geez, where's this guy come from? Like Leao, right? Or some of them are going to be a bit quieter, like Charles de Ketelaere, and you just have to go, no, we know this guy's got the quality. We know this guy's got the technical ability. He just needs to develop his game. He needs to mature. He needs to whatever it is. He needs to bulk up, that guy. I think he needs to he still looks a bit lightweight. But it just takes a bit of patience. And I think if that is Milan's modus operandi, which I think it is, they're going to have to give Pioli time. Otherwise, you're kind of contradicting your own plan. I think the bad thing is that with the league being open this year for the Champions League places, and that being helped by Juventus just disappearing, like there's a lot of pressure now. There's a lot more pressure of like, okay, if we do drop that odd point or we do draw instead of win, it could make a huge difference at the end of the season because everyone's basically on the same points. Exactly. So there's a lot of pressure, but I think I like the way Milan are trying to operate. I like the way that they're trying to be like, clever in the market. And they have still been clever in the market. Bringing in Maignan for next to nothing is just genius. Like they've still done very well in the transfer market. I just think there's a mix of loss of confidence and youth. And I think and then the weird thing and we talked about it before, old strikers, all your strikers are old. Like Giroud, Origi, and Zlatan, who, as we said, is just a cheerleader at this point, is not that's not a front line. That's not an attacking threat. You can't just hope that Leao and Sailor-Makers, when he does decide he fancies it and turns up, can do the job. I like Sailor-Makers as a player, but he's just not consistent enough.
I don't think he's good enough. Personally, I don't think he's good enough for them. Yeah, and I'd probably extend that to likes of Rebic as well.
I agree. Sailor-Makers I like.
And this is the thing, I was going to put it to you, Rory. Let's just say, imagine we are playing Football Manager. I mean, if there was an opportunity to get someone in right now for this window, who do you think is that kind of player that they need to bring in? Because it feels like there's a number of positions they could do with reinforcements, but would you go and gamble it on a striker, or would you go for Zaniolo as being rumoured, or would you go for someone else? I mean, you're shaking your head.
Staying miles away from Zaniolo. I would honestly be chasing him away from the training ground. I think I'm going to steal it from, and it was an idea kind of put to me, Kyle on Twitter. I think he's a Dundalk fan, actually. So, I'm on the town. We interact every so often on Twitter, and we were talking about Atalanta at the weekend, the 3-3 and we were talking about Højlund, and he said Milan should be absolutely all over him. And I thought that is a very good point. Now, I know he's had a good, he's not been in Italy long, and he's had a very good start. So it could be a kind of like Piontek thing where you're on a hot run and then you're terrible, right? And everyone was laughing at Piontek and Milan for buying him. But I think there is somewhat like a player like Højlund, I'd be going, maybe Milan. If your thing is young players who you're going to develop, bring in, give time, he's been pretty bloody promising. They'd have to throw a lot of money at Atalanta because, he's their attacking lineup for the foreseeable future. So they're not going to want to sell him. But I think a player like that or him would be who I'd be going for if I was Milan. I think players like Kudus at Ajax would be like dream case scenario, but there's no way they can afford him. Like, I think for Italian teams at the moment, it's very much trying to buy within Italy or
loan deals,
or Belgium, or like the that kind of tier of league just
Poland below now,
right? Yeah, exactly. I think maybe someone like Højlund or something would be great for Milan. But my main priority would be getting a striker that could set you up for the next couple of years, because I think the short-termism won't work for long. As we're seeing at Inter, we've praised them for their short-termism, and some of those signings work, but some of them don't. And when they don't, you then have to just buy again a year later and buy again a year later, and you end up buying yourself out of a hole. It's like, it just, I think if they want to go for young strikers, there's not many better than Højlund in the league that they could get, I think. What about you? Where would you be going?
If I had to say one person right now, I think they do need reinforcements at the back line. And there's two that spring to mind just purely on this kind of philosophy of potential to sell on or, become that big star. So the one that I called out in our YouTube short series was Mehmet Colli from Atalanta. I think he's really solid defensively.
Yeah,
but also you only have to look at Scalvini as well. I mean, that guy looks incredible. He's tall. He can play anywhere across that kind of back line. He just reminds me of kind of a Chiellini-esque defender, but he throws his body up there and he scores goals. That's the other thing. So I just think maybe off the back of what they're doing at Atalanta, bigger stage, more exposure. Certainly, I think he'll be adapted to that kind of style of football.
We are just picking apart Atalanta's squad.
We are,
Sorry, Atalanta.
But I was also thinking about this. The only other players, in the middle of the park, I almost feel like that's where they probably need solidity as well. So Amrabat, for example, I think he'd slide in quite nicely. And then I'm thinking like up top, and I agree with you on that point of like they do need someone who could maybe change it up because they need some youth, definitely. And then you just kind of think who could maybe complement someone like Leao. You kind of touched on Kudos. I think he's a good shout, but that's probably unlikely to ever happen. So then you kind of look at who else is out there. I mean, I really do struggle because I'm thinking about what clubs have got players that might not be necessarily in the first 11 that could be potentially with an opportunity to play out there. There's no one that springs to mind, really. There's no one that kind of springs as that kind of maybe someone that could go to. I'll throw it out there, Mario Icardi, because, that would be quite funny.
The absolute scenes.
Wander on the streets of Milan again.
Like once again, I'd be sat with a cup of water and start shaking just as she arrives in the city. The impact that would have. For the latest episode of Keeping Up with the Icardis, I think we need that. Mauro signs for Milan. I'd quite like that. I would quite like that. Exactly. But for Milan, look, it's just I think they'll get through this form. What is key is that they need Maignan back. I'm not sure when he's back. I've not done my due diligence, but the second he's back, I think we'll see a sharp uptake in Milan's form. Because I just feel like that defense just needs a bit of organizing. And it needs that structure again. Because I think Kalulu and Tomori, a couple of weeks ago, we were like, these guys are absolutely crushing it. Kalulu, again, can play across the back line. He was a player I thought was bang average, and then he was really good. And I was like, wow, where's this guy come from? So I think, honestly, once you get Maignan back in there, it will be a whole different team. Also, maybe if they could get Kessié back on loan would be quite nice if he's not happy at Barcelona. But we're going to very quickly, because it was kind of happening while we were talking, Empoli won into 0 at the San Siro. I think it was the first ever win for Empoli at the San Siro. Skriniar sent off, and that looks like it's his career over. Was that his last game for the club?
Quite possibly. I think what came out from his agent, Roberto Statisci, I think is how he pronounced it. I'm not too sure if that's the right way. But apparently he said that Inter had made contacts about his future from the summer. So believe it or not, I think there was an agreed sum with PSG to sell him on, but then Inter last minute pulled out of the deal. Which was very interesting, given that I think it was 70-80 million that was talked about at the time, which I think would have been a nice kind of sum. But I don't know
what they could have done with that money.
I know, but then Rory, it's clearly the ultras that were on the back of Sunning that clearly influenced that decision. I think that's why that didn't happen. So then apparently Inter have gone in November offering him a new contract, and he plainly just said no. Apparently the decision was he said no. So they went in again in January. Again, the decision was no. Hence why Inter have now gone in to make sure Bastoni is signed up, as well as Çalhanoğlu, which I think is sensible given the circumstances, because they are going to be the big assets, probably, if we talk about this summer, potentially to sell on, if they do have to sell on, that is. They're going to have to finance something. I don't know who that's likely to be, because I struggle with that Inter Milan squad. Like we've been saying, they are for now, but they're not the future. And I don't know who's coming through. I don't really see much in the way of ambition from the board as well. I think it's fair to say. I think Inzaghi might get to a point where he gets really frustrated. But at the same time, Inzaghi's winning stuff with that team. Believe it or not,
it's incredible.
I mean, you look at that team, and despite the fact that we were talking about how bad that performance was on Monday, they are still winning stuff. They're still in the top 4, which is probably, suitable for them right now. But it just feels like if they could get a bit more backing, that team could do a lot more. And they don't have to splash out money, They just have to be shrewd, and they have been shrewd. This is the thing. I think they've got the right background at the moment in terms of a setup behind the scenes. It just feels like at the moment they just cannot go that much further when it comes to transfer fees. They were clever with Lukaku, but it hasn't works out for them. I think he's gone. I think his legs are just done, and it's fair to say. But then, when they're talking about potentially Scalvini coming in, they're talking about Marcus Thuram coming in. I don't know about you. Just don't see how they're going to afford it. They've got to ship someone out to do it.
I think it will be interesting to see how they do it because they need reinforcements. They need to improve that squad. As we've said, the top 4 race is tight as hell, and they're going to have to add something. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. I'm not like you. I'm not convinced they can. I think they're going to have to find some more free agents knocking about or promise money in the future. But we do also need to give credit to Empoli. The goal scorer, Baldanzi, 19 years old, attacking midfielder, 4th goal of the season for Empoli. Another youth product coming out of Empoli that could be worth keeping an eye on. Empoli we were talking about, they're now up to 9th, right? And they're since coming into Serie A, they've never really looked in danger. They've just turned up and turned into a mid-table team, and they're really, really beautiful to watch. I think that's now unbeaten in 5, 3 wins in their last 5. And there's a bit of a gap until you get to the European places, but they're looking completely at home. And they beat Juventus away last season off the top of my head.
Yes. They did.
So they're starting to get these big results, and it's great to see, right? Really beautiful little club that develops players.
Yeah, and I think special mention for Liam Henderson. He was playing in that kind of regista role against Inter, which is, when you look at him, you would go, oh, he's not the kind of player to really offer too much. He's more give him the ball and he'll run. He'll just run for you. But fair play to him. I think he's gone under the radar a bit because I think other sort of British/Irish players have been owning Serie A in the meantime, and he's kind of gone under the radar, done his job. I think Empoli are one of those clubs, though, generally, everyone has a bit of respect for them because they do things in the right manner in terms of the way they play. They're not always challenging for those kind of top spots, but it's nice to see them try and aspire to be in that top half mix. I think it's, you've got a nice little mixture of clubs that could do it. We've always kind of said that this is kind of Sassuolo territory, but they're doing really terribly at the moment. I look at the other teams that are around them. We talked about Lecce a few weeks ago. They've kind of come off the ball a bit recently because of results. Fiorentina seems to be stuck in that mix at the moment. Bologna, another team, Monza. So I think they're better than a lot of those clubs at the moment. I just wish they could, if they could spend a bit more, then you could maybe see them challenging the likes of Udinese and even Torino. Because Torino, for as much as we like calling them out sometimes, they just lack quality across the team, really. I think Torino are always one of those when they play even Juventus, we're always trying to hope that they win their first game against them, but they just don't have that quality. So again, they've got a really good manager in Juric as well. But Zanetti in obviously Empoli doing a really good job. I think he's someone that could be picked up in future. What do you think about him and the way he's gone about his business so far?
Yeah, I think he's a manager that's kind of been exciting for a while. I think when he was at now I'm just double checking, he was at Venezia, was he? He was at Venezia. He was managing at Venezia and did quite well there. And I think this is a club that also has a bit of a history of kind of developing players and managers. I'm going to go through some of their players you might know who played for them, like Mark Bresciano. They had Jorge Vargas, they had Ignacio Abate, Marco Borriello, they've had Luca Toni, Piotr Zielinski was there, Luciano Spalletti was player and manager there, Antonio Di Natale, Eder, Sebastian Giovinco, Massimo Maccarone, Middlesbrough fans, Vincenzo Montella. There's a lot of great players that have come through this club. And in terms of managers, as I said, the Spalletti, Marco Giampaolo, there's quite a few big managers that have come through this team as well. So they're very good at just giving people the time to develop and giving them that space to develop. And when they get into Serie A, like they've been a yo-yo team, I suppose. But when they come into Serie A, they tend to stay for a while, and hopefully they are here for a while because they play good football. They play really good football. And Liam Henderson, if you are listening, we have slid into your DMs with an invite to come onto the show. So if you are listening, come on to the show. But I think we're going to move on from Serie A there. That was the kind of midweek action. We're going to preview in the next part of the show. So for now, we're going to very, very, very quickly do some Carabao Cup semi-finals. We should probably start at the City ground.
Yeah,
light work for Manchester United as Nottingham Forest make it very accommodating. What did you think of the performances from both teams? I'm going to talk about Anthony, but I'm going to let you go first.
Okay, so I'll talk about how terrible Forest were then. They just pretty much didn't offer too much for Man United in terms of resistance. First half, they were quite shockingly open. I think it was just a gap in quality between the two sides was very obvious. I think obviously it doesn't help that their main goalkeeper was missing in Dean Henderson. So they had to rely on Wayne Hennessy, whose reaction skills is as bad as Handanovic when it comes to saving things.
Yeah.
It's fair
I feel like 2 of those goals don't go in if it's Dean Henderson. I
think all 3 potentially.
Okay.
I think he gets fingertips at least to Rashford's. Although that was a very
hell of a goal, though. Bloody hell.
Well taken goal. The second one, obviously, it's a rebound. He should have maybe done better with the initial shots from Casemiro, I think it was, and then Wout Weghorst with his first goal for Man United fans. So I'm sure that's going to start his goal scoring spree now. So that's good news for them. And then the third one was kind of just schoolboy error-esque. It was kind of a ball that came into the box. Nico Williams even tries to clear it, and then
I had a lot of respect for trying to dribble the ball, like trying to do kicky uppies with the ball on the edge of your own penalty area. I was like, you've got to respect.
That's very brave.
Very
brave.
You've got to try
brave.
it.
Yeah. It wasn't his fault though, because
there was nothing else he could have done.
The defender's name, who escapes me, the Nottingham Forest defender, he should have just closed down Bruno Fernandes. He just gave him all the space in the world, and he slots it past Wayne Hennessy, and then that was it. It was kind of, I was thinking about this when I went out for a walk earlier. I was like, Man United could probably afford to have the youth team against Nottingham Forest in the second leg and still progress, because you shouldn't do it. But I think that would be really good for Man United because it allows them to rest certain players.
I think the 3-0 makes it pretty comfortable. I don't know if Forest have scored 3 in a game yet this season. So I think I'm going to go with no. So I think United have kind of got the job done. I think there was that one goal where Surridge got a goal and he was just offside. And I think if that had counted, if he hadn't have been offside, I think maybe it's a different game. I think United did still look exposed at times when Forest did attack, which was rarely, but when they did, their attacks tended to be dangerous. I think United were get atable. But Anthony has a really interesting player. I think he scored some absolute worldies, right? He scored that banger against Man City. He just scored unbelievable goals. But I think when Nicola Pepe was this ineffective, people were a lot louder than they're being about Anthony. I feel like there was a lot of moments in that game and against Arsenal as well where I was like, 100 million? Really? Like, I know, as we've just said about Milan, it takes some players longer than others to settle into leagues. It takes and I'm not trying to pile on him. I'm just like, I think he's done damage to the market in being valued at 100 million, basically, because now everyone's going to be measured at him and above. But I thought he had a kind of disappointing night added to his performance against Arsenal. I think they're going to need to get something out of him because Rashford is unbelievable. Form of his life, incredible goal. Exactly. He's loving life under Ten Hag, thriving. But you can't rely on him to just be your only attacking outlet because teams will just figure that out. Teams will just be all right, we'll just pile on him and then they can't do anything. It's like when Arsenal's only outlet was Kieran Tierney down the left. So teams just went, okay, we'll just defend our right wing. Now what are you going to do?
Exactly.
And that was it. So I think they're going to need players like Anthony to kind of step up a bit and kind of find their feet. But yeah, for Forest, that was a truly, truly awful performance. United are through to the final. Well, United are technically through to the
first step of going there, 50% in, basically.
In the other leg, we had Newcastle at St. Mary's.
St. Mary's, yes.
Birmingham, St. Mary's. Really weird decision here. I'm not sure why the Armstrong goal was chalked off. Now, it was a handball, right, is what they said. As I see it, his hand was in a natural position. It didn't influence the flight of the ball, and he headed it in, right? That's a goal for me. That's a goal.
I thought when I saw it, it looks like a goal. I think it's one of those where VAR, when you slow it down, it can make it look like it was handball, and that's my issue with it. I think. Because if VAR is not there, that gets given. I think that changes the complexity of that game a bit, like what we said with Sarrige's goal against Man United. But I do feel on the balance of play, if we take that goal out of it, Newcastle seemed to be all over Southampton. And if Joe Linton had his goal-scoring boots, which he eventually did, right?
He had a few chances, to be fair.
There was two sitters in particular. One that he blasted. God knows where that was going. It was a bit Harry Kane-esque, wasn't it? I think, that was the penalty spot. But I mean, it's one of those. But you have to also say kudos to the defence. I think that's what you were going to call out anyway. But that defence plus Pope, and he's not the Catholic Pope we're talking here, Nick Pope. He has been incredible form.
So they've now not conceded in 4 games. The last game they conceded in was Sheffield Wednesday, right? Which was the last game they lost. But before that game, they hadn't conceded in 4 as well. So basically, 8 out of 9 games they've kept a clean sheet, which is utterly mental. I think it's just incredible coaching from Eddie Howe. It's genuinely incredible coaching. I think the job he's doing, regardless of everything else and all the other noise around Newcastle, it is an incredible job he's doing. Sven Botman has been an amazing signing. Kieran Trippier has brought a whole presence to that team that I think people are obviously realizing that, but I think he's one of their most important players, if not their most important player. Alongside that, improving players like Fabian Schär and stuff like that. I think it's just an incredible coaching performance from Eddie Howe. And Newcastle are not here to mess about. I think when I was watching the 2 games, I was like, United look really United are looking really good. They're looking really fast, attacking, direct. They're threatening. They're looking good. And then I was looking at Newcastle, and I was like, I think Newcastle shut out this United team. I think. Newcastle have now reached a level where they've done it incredibly quickly, where they're competing with the big teams, with the Big Six. And I think I said it when the semi-finals were drawn. I think Newcastle are still the favourites. I still think there's something about Eddie Howe winning his first trophy at Newcastle. I can just see it, and I think in a big game he gets it done.
I was going to say, without overindulging around an interview that we've been having as pods, there is a Newcastle legends that we've spoken to. But in the interview that you did, Rory, without naming the player or person in particular, what was their indication of this Newcastle squad? What was their kind of thoughts? Did they think this was revolutionary? Were they pleased? Were they happy with what they've seen so far?
I would say they were very, very excited. They kind of compared it to the time they were first at the club. There's a little clue for you. And just said, it's a very exciting time to be a Newcastle fan. And they are definitely hoping that he delivers the first trophy for the club since 1955. I can confirm that, or 1965. But yeah, they were saying that it was... the roots are being put in, and it's being very sensible. It's just very sensible what they're doing, and they're not doing. They're not being mad about it. They've not got Todd Bowley in. They're kind of being sensible and thinking, right, let's put the process in. This takes time, and they're overachieving for where they should be. I think, or they're ahead of schedule. They're definitely ahead of schedule. So 1-0 against Southampton. Southampton will be pretty gutted because I think that goal would have been a huge thing to take to St James's Park. But I think Nathan Jones is getting a better performances out of Southampton.
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
I think of all the teams that are down there, they're the ones that are looking like improving, whereas others are not showing much sign of improvement. Yeah. So I think signs for hope for Southampton fans, I think. And it's still 1-0. You never know. It is still only 1-0. Newcastle definitely should have made it more. They were really wasteful in front of goal. Wasteful in front of goal. So before we go into the next part, very quickly, transfer business. It's come out today that as if things can't get any worse for Everton fans, boyhood fan Anthony Gordon, Everton's own, has decided to not turn up for training because Newcastle have shown interest. What happens here, Adam?
I think he will make a move. I think there's been, for a few days, I've been listening to radio sources as well as just, sources on the likes of Twitter, etc., social media. It does seem like Newcastle were planning this window to attract a bid for his services. I think they want to get someone that's quite youthful on the ball, that will potentially have growth, that fits the philosophy of Dan Ashworth, and certainly someone that maybe Eddie Howe can get the best out of. I think the only problem I have with it is that what has he done in the last sort of 6 months that kind of warrants this kind of interest? And, we talked at the last window about the fees that were being floated about for him at Chelsea potentially, and it's just like gobsmacked at like someone that hasn't really delivered. He's shown promise, that's definitely there, but has he shown consistency? I mean, I'll put it to you. I mean, what does he add to that squad now that you've seen Newcastle on Tuesday? Do you think he adds something different to what they already have?
Look, if Eddie Howe can turn Almiron into a goal-scoring machine and get those goals out of Almiron, I think he can do it with Anthony Gordon. I think Anthony Gordon is a proper shithouse and he's a proper wind-up. Yeah. He fucking loves it. But I think he's quick as hell. I think he has got a finish in him, although a lot of goals of his have been deflected and a bit scuffy, like a bit scuffed. But I think there is a player there. It just needs to be like carved and molded, and I think maybe if he gets into like a club that isn't a bin fire, then maybe he can be turned into that player. I think the prices that were being quoted were absolute madness. I was like, for a player who's got 3 or 4 Premier League goals, just because he's English, all of a sudden it's 60 million. Like, the money was absolutely mental. I think Newcastle would have to pay. I think if you offer Everton now 35, 40 million, they sell him without even thinking about it because they need to improve that squad everywhere. Yeah. And in them trying to improve their squad, Danjuma has joined Tottenham in the... Oh my God, if I was an Everton
most fan, random honestly, transfer ever.
Well, did you see the DM that the Everton fan shared?
I haven't, no.
No, so an Everton fan DM'd Danjuma saying, "Come to Goodison, lad. Like, we need you. Okay. We need you to give 100% when you come to Goodison." And he replied, and I will give everything to keep you in the Premier League. And then within an hour, signed for Tottenham Hotspur.
Wow.
Yeah, it is crazy. So he has decided that he's off to Tottenham. I think that is an interesting signing. I think for Villarreal, for ages, he's been he's been good at Villarreal.
He's been good, yeah.
He was killing it at Bournemouth before that. Before he went to Villarreal. So
he started it in the Championship as well, because it was that interest from Villarreal that got him the move at the time. But he's an interesting player because he's also done it in Champions League for Villarreal. Yeah. So I think he's got potential. But thinking about it, who does he displace in that Spurs squad? Is it Son? Is it,
Richarlison? Who's done nothing.
This is true. I mean, he's been mainly a bench player, though, hasn't he? To be fair, Richarlison. So I'm just curious because obviously they've been rumored to go for the Porto or Sporting Lisbon right back. Now, he's not really a right back. He's a right wing back. So he's basically fits in with that Conte philosophy.
Yeah.
But then if Conte's leaving in the summer, which is what the rumours are coming out as, why would you buy someone that's probably only going to last this system and then have to, because they're going to have to spend something like 52 million, aren't they? They're going to splash out 60 odd million on this right wing back. And then the next manager that comes in is just going to go 4-4-2 and then he's out of the door. He's out of the door for, like, if they're lucky, a loan deal back to Sporting Lisbon, and they'll be lucky if they get 10 million back. That's what's going to happen.
It's almost as if they don't have a plan, Adam. It's almost as if they don't have a plan. It's mad, right? But Everton, so I'm just going to keep banging the drum on Everton. They are apparently lining up Hakim Ziyech as a bring-in from Chelsea. Now, I love Ziyech. He is a beautiful player to watch. I don't know if he's the player you want in a relegation fight.
No, I can't see that happening. I think there's been rumours of him going to Roma on loan, and Milan was rumoured today as well, which is, I can't see him fitting into that system with Pioli. I don't know. Maybe gives that balance. Maybe even gives Leao a bit of a rest, potentially. But yeah, again, it's an interesting development. I think we'll see him back somewhere across shores. I think he's been frozen out in the Premier League. I think maybe some defenders have found out how to play against him as well. I don't know what you think. I think maybe he's a bit found out in the Premier League, but he'd probably do it across the shores. And I think he'd be very good for Serie A. I think it'd be a welcome addition down there for sure. But whilst we're on the theme of Serie A, did you see the news of Bournemouth having their bid accepted for Zaniolo, only for Zaniolo to turn down a chance to live it up in Dorset?
You don't want to play in front of that 10,000 capacity stadium? No. What I will say is congratulations to Bournemouth for just being like, you know,
the ambition.
Why not? Yeah. Absolutely.
I thought I was watching an FM screen when that news came up because it felt like an FM story.
Sorry, my comment was really, really harsh on Bournemouth, but they why not go for these players? They're good
got the
club.
Money now.
They're definitely going to be in the Premier League next year. I don't think they're really in danger of going down at the minute. I think there's teams worse than them. Let me just remind myself of the table before I say that. But I think, maybe put a relegation release clause in that contract.
Asterisks to that.
Asterisks. Ignore everything I just said. But no, I think, put a relegation release clause in that contract, Nicolo, if you're going to join. But I like that they're being ambitious and being like, you know what, we can definitely offer this guy something. But even at Bournemouth, I'd be like, nah, just leave that guy, man. Don't worry about it. Just go and get someone else. But a story I also did want to jump on very quickly before we talk about the imbalance across Europe and the leagues is now I think it's just John, but it's Jhon Jahan Duran, who's joined Aston Villa from Chicago Fire, Colombian centre forward. He's come through the famous academy at Envigado that FM players will know because it produces all the good Colombian players. James Rodriguez came through there. And I don't know if you saw the video of his announcement or him, it's one of the videos about his signings where Juan Pablo Angel greeted him on the big screen to Aston Villa in Spanish, talking about how the club and the fans made him feel at home. He's still an Aston Villa fan. And the whole end that you are currently sat in, I saw the faces and the tears and just a really beautiful moment. You can see how much it meant to that guy. At Chicago Fire, he had 8 goals in 27 games, 9 goals in 47 games for Envigado in Colombia. And just a player to keep an eye on. Quite exciting. Only 19 years of age. Winger, attacking, centre forward, could be a player to keep an eye on. Someone that Emery, I think in his system, young players, wingers, he loves it. I think someone that could be a clever little buy on the Fantasy Premier League to have on your bench just in case.
He sounds like an upgrade on Ings as well, doesn't he? Danny Ings going to West Ham with his injury history as well. That's a big one.
And I keep saying very quickly, but very, very quickly, Mikel Antonio today on his podcast saying there's a possibility he could leave West Ham in this window.
Ooh, okay.
Saying he wouldn't want to leave. He doesn't want to leave, but there's a possibility he could leave, which would
be going to Bournemouth, clearly.
Massive. Anyone who gets him is getting an incredible
quality player. Quality player.
Yeah,
and I think I'm just
Milan, get Mikel Antonio in. Fucking hell.
I'm going to extend to this bit before we actually talk about the topic we want. Did you see the shithousery from Inter fans, in particular our friend Uncle Sharma, about maybe Gagliardini going to Nottingham Forest and saying how he's a brilliant player, he's Vieira-esque. Oh, I loved it. I loved the way that Nottingham Forest were kind of being fished here, and they were like buying this bait. They were like, "Look at the goals! Look at these clips! He's amazing!"
Absolute bangers, to be fair to him. Yeah, he does only bangers. But yeah, he does nothing else.
Definitely worth 70 million, right?
yeah. So we do need to quickly, well, not quickly, who knows? We need to talk about how football is officially broken. So Adam, take us through the figures of the clubs, what they've spent across Europe, and why the Super League already exists.
So, I'm going to just talk it as it is currently so far in terms of transfers spent across Europe. And it wouldn't surprise you to say that Premier League is leading the way as per usual. However, it's in stark contrast to the likes of La Liga, Serie A, Ligue 1, and the Bundesliga. So if we start off with the league that spent the least, it is Serie A, currently on 9 million euros.
9 million. That is a quarter of Anthony Gordon. You get one leg.
Get a leg, basically a leg. You are followed up by Ligue 1 with 21 million euros. Then it's followed by La Liga with 24 million euros. Bundesliga at 48 million, which kind of baffled me. I'm trying to work out where these monies have gone to, because Jan Sommer, I think, was 8.5 million. There you go. That's 40 million's got to be made up somewhere. And then Premier League on a massive 466 million so far to date. It's inevitable, unfortunately, Rory, that this Super League aspect's going to happen. But it seems to be that Premier League fans are still kind of saying, no, it's not going to happen. And they're on the high horses. But if clubs in Europe are struggling for funds, they're struggling to generate the same revenues as the Premier League, it's inevitable that they're going to want this and demand this. Otherwise, they can't sustain this. They can't continue to develop talents to then sell on to the Premier League clubs. I mean, where do you stand on this now? Because I think at the time we were rightly calling it out and saying this is an injustice. We shouldn't be talking about Super Leagues. But when we've got this kind of accounting aspect that is basically financing the rest of Europe if they sell a player, it just doesn't seem fair anymore. It's not like an equal talent across the board. I mean, I remember the years where there was always the kind of battles between Italian league versus Spanish league versus the Premier League. And it was always a case of who was the top team in Europe. And now you don't get that anymore. It seems to be all hoovered up by the Premier League. And it almost feels unnatural now, the Premier League. And I think a lot of people are getting detracted by the Premier League. I mean, where do you stand on it?
There's a lot of people who aren't fans of the Premier League, who are like Serie A fans, who are Bundesliga fans, who fucking hate the Premier League, and I do not blame them at all, because any player that comes anywhere near good in your league, Bournemouth come in with a bid and are like, we want your striker. Right? Fuck off, who are you? Like, I can definitely understand how that would like really, really piss you off if you were like, I don't know, a fan of like a mid-table German team, or even someone like Dortmund or somewhere. Just like, for Christ's sake, we can't build anything, because the second anyone shows any sign of promise, it's like, here's 100 million, or fuck off. Like, so I think I can understand where the anger comes from, but then with my Premier League head on, I think, well, market your fucking league better. The Premier League wasn't the Premier League wasn't the biggest league in Europe. Serie A was, right? And then the Premier League started marketing themselves, and they just absolutely blew everyone out of the water, because they've been the best at marketing the league, selling the league. They've just been the best at it. Serie A can still not figure out their foreign broadcasting rights and get the contract sorted out. They're fucking terrible at it. So don't, like, the anger then shouldn't be directed at the Premier League. Direct it towards the people who run your league and who can't figure their shit out, because there's no reason why Serie A, with the history of the clubs, with the beauty of the game, with like the aesthetic of the Bologna Stadium is more beautiful than fucking Reading in the Premier League. If you know what I mean? Like, it's much more marketable, right? It's much easier to sell. So do your job, and then you can start marketing the league, increasing those TV rights, increasing the prize money. Now, the other question is it too far down the road at this point? Yes, I think it is. Like, because the Premier League has marketed themselves so well that across most countries, people only give a shit about the Premier League. Every time I've worked in Kazakhstan, I've worked in Poland, I've worked in Spain, I've traveled quite a lot, and people only give a shit about the Premier League, Barcelona and Real Madrid. That's it. They're not supporting Athletic Bilbao, right? No. They're not supporting I don't know, Wolfsburg in Germany. So it's true. I think it is too far down the road. The Premier League is this mammoth thing that has just dominated the world's the football world. And I think how can we go about equalizing it or making it somewhere near a level playing field? I do not know. I think I don't know. I honestly don't know. You can't even say, right, the Premier League have to give money to European clubs. No. We can't even get the Premier League to give money to the EFL. That's a bloody fight. So, I don't know where or what you do to try and level the playing field, basically, because what's going to happen, the beauty of the Champions League until they change it is that still English teams aren't dominating it, right? It's still won by Spanish teams. Not the Italian teams, but Spanish teams, German teams. There's still a variety of winners. If they change it, I'm not sure if that continues to happen, because I think there would just be a monopoly on all the talent, and any English team that gets in there will just be better than the Italian equivalent, than the Spanish equivalent, bar Barcelona and Real Madrid. And even Barcelona, we don't know how long that's going to be on for, because at some point their consequences, their chickens are going to come home to roost at some point. They have to. So I don't know. It seems like the game is in a real sorry state. But my last thing before I let you jump in, is with the Super League, I'm not even necessarily against the idea of a European Super League. The idea that I'm against is the no relegation, no promotion, the closed gate of it. That's what I'm against. I don't like we have the divine right to be great. You guys have to earn your right. That's what I don't like about it. I think a European Super League is where football's heading. So if there was a point where it was, okay, you have the European Super League, but if Arsenal have a shite season, then you're playing in the Premier League, you don't get your Super League games. Yeah. And I would want the Super League to run concurrently with the domestic league. I don't want teams leaving their domestic league, right? I don't want Arsenal getting promoted from the Premier League into the European Super League. No, the European Super League is something that's additional. That would be, in then circumstances, I don't have any real issues with it. It's kind of like the NFL at that point, but not closed. It's just a super league, right? I don't know how you feel about it.
I've just been trying to think of different ideas that you would kind of try and maybe counteract this kind of Super League idea. And it always brings me back to the original Champions League format, where it always was the champions of every country's league. That's the way it used to be. It got to a point where teams got greedy because they finished second, they finished third. And that's where they started going, oh, we're missing out on that revenue because this club's gone through, or we've always got bloody Rosenborg in these group stages. We don't want them in the group stages. We don't want Legia Warsaw turning up at this group stages. And that's where it became like a point. So does it mean, I'm just putting it out there, do we think that maybe just reverting backwards potentially? Because then you've got those clubs that always finish second or third. They'd always be in the UEFA Cup or the Cup Winners' Cup. And you always got one or two of the big teams like your Barcelonas winning those competitions, right? There was always that one team that were outside of that mix. And it almost feels like you're going to have to do something like that just to break the monopoly. You can't constantly try to revamp the Champions League because the current proposed format looks absolutely fucking terrible.
Yeah, it looks
absolutely
horrible.
horrendous. You were talking about FM saves and
it ruined it, honestly.
It is.
I worked my bollocks off to get Vizra Krakow into the Champions League. And then by the time I got there, I was like, oh, this is terrible. I don't want to do this anymore. I think, I don't like the plans that are bringing in. I think that's kind of what the Europa League and the Conference League are trying to be, right? Kind of spread the wealth a little bit, try and get and I think they're doing a fairly good job of it. I just think what the problem is that a team that's getting relegated from the Premier League can afford more than the champions of Italy. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That, like, you get more for finishing bottom of the Premier League than you do for winning Serie. Yeah. That is, like, taken away from European football and, like, the competitions and stuff. It has to be that there's an issue there that needs to be addressed, but people getting paid much more than me need to figure this out because I do not know how you fix it. I just think it's something that, unfortunately, it's kind of ruining the other leagues. Now, what we are seeing is like a dominance of one team in more leagues.
Yeah.
So you've got Bayern in Germany, right? You've got PSG in France. Real Madrid and Barcelona in Spain, basically, it's just those two. Atletico might pop up every so often, but basically it's Real Madrid, Barcelona. And then in Italy, you've got no clear winner, and everyone's everyone's not that great, but it's a really even playing field, so it keeps it entertaining.
It's enjoyable, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think maybe you just got to find your fun there. I love Serie A. Serie A is the best it's been for a while because anyone could win it. And it could be 4 different winners in 4 years. That's mental. It doesn't happen in many places. But you would say on the European stage, Italian clubs are not making an impact at all. So you have to say that, maybe the quality has dipped a bit, but it's a more level playing field. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the leagues develop because I think the Ligue 1 this year is actually a bit closer, I suppose. But we are seeing kind of more monopolization of leagues. And I think that is down to the lower clubs that don't get European football just not getting any income, just not being able to compete with Bournemouth offering for Nicolo Zaniolo, right? But guys, we're gonna give a quick break there, right? Nice, very, very quick break. We promise we won't leave you for long, and we're gonna come back and preview FA Cup action, Serie A action. See you there.
Hi, I'm David Wheeler, and you're listening to the Anglo-Italian podcast.
Here we are, last part of the show. We are ready to talk about some FA Cup 4th round action, and we're going to leave the big one to the end. But I'm going to throw out, Adam, I'm going to throw out 2 games that I think are going to be a shock, and then you throw out 2 games that you think upsets of the round. Let's do it. So my first upset of the round, I'm going to be bold and say, I don't know if this is an upset, but I'm going to say Brighton beat Liverpool. Last time it was, I think Brighton have scored 3 against Liverpool the last few times they've played them. It does seem to be a bit of a bogey team for the Reds at the moment. We've seen De Zerbi ball popping off. Evan Ferguson, the future of Irish football, killing it. So I think this could be an upset of the round if it counts as an upset. Give me one of your upsets, Adam.
I am going to go for Walsall, who are at home to Leicester City on Saturday. Now, Leicester City, it's fair to say, haven't been doing quite well in the league. Walsall, on the other hand, have been doing really well in the FA Cup run. Beat my beloved Wickham in the first round, but they've also pulled off some shocks along the way, beating even Stockport County in the last round. I think they could have legs here. I think they could, in that Bescott Stadium, which is situated nicely on that M6.
Right on the motorway.
Always when you go past, everyone looks across to see that stadium on the M6.
I've been to that stadium a few times. It's got one of the worst views in football, I'm going to say. The away end, you've just got massive pylons the whole way across. I remember watching the Alex Walsall and just being like this for 90 minutes as the game's like going on around me. But yeah, you're right. Every time you go past, it's like, oh, that's Walsall. There we go. That's Walsall. Yeah. I think you're right. That could be a big shock. Leicester looking, in all sorts of trouble. And my next upset is going to be, I'm going to go for, which one am I going to go for? I'm going to say Wrexham, Sheffield United,
Oh.
under the lights, maybe. It depends how dark,
Yes,
how
at the
early
race
it gets
course.
dark in Wrexham on a Sunday at 5:30. But maybe the second half, under the lights in Wrexham with Rob Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. Rob Reynolds? Right,
Yes,
Ryan
it
Reynolds.
is. Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds, sounds like my dad. Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney there. I think this has got everything, all the ingredients for a classic FA Cup shock. And they're going to be they're both great on Twitter whenever Wrexham are on whenever Wrexham are playing, but it will be definitely worth following them and following the game. Sheffield United obviously flying at the top of the championship at the minute, looking like they are Premier League bound. Is their focus going to be on the FA Cup? Maybe not. They could rotate the squad a little bit. So I think this has all the ingredients. And of course, bang your mortgage on Paul Mullen getting a goal.
Yes, especially with those boots saying "fuck the Tories." So yes, beautiful, beautiful.
My man, Paul Mullen, good man.
I'm going to add my mix. Then my last call is going to be Preston North End to beat Spurs at home. So Preston North End.
You could say that. I couldn't say it. If I said it,
yes,
sounds like
I thought I would do it because there was another game that I was going to call out, but I'm not going to. But it's Preston North End versus Spurs. I think based on their record so far, Preston North End traditionally quite hard team. You know, they're not going to make it easy for Spurs. Spurs going up to Preston ain't going to be easy either. That's not a pleasant place to go to. You know, there's cobble streets in Lancashire. Yeah, nice stadium though, Deepdale. It has to be said.
I've been there a few times.
It's one of those that I think on the cold night, Spurs won't fancy it necessarily. And if Conte plays the way he has been, I think there could be at least a goal for Preston North End here. So I'm expecting maybe a 1-0 win here. I'm going to call it 1-0 win. What about you, Rory?
Nice. Good. And of course, we need to talk about the big one. It is tonight as you guys are listening. Manchester City taking on the mighty Arsenal. As we see now, this is such a big bloody game. The weird thing is, right, before Spurs and before United, I was like sick with nerves, right? Like honestly, just quiet and uneasy, and everyone, Derby Day, right? You're just shitting yourself consistently until actually the final whistle's blown. With City, I have no real feelings either way. I know it's a big game, but I'm not as afraid of losing. But then when I think about it, I'm like, this is a big psychological test. This is a proper this is like the first round of a boxing match, right? I think both teams are going to be feeling each other out, knowing that we have to play each other twice in the league. This is going to be such a little sparring match of right, who's got what, who's going to expose and show what they can do. I think it's going to be a super cagey affair. It will be interesting to see how much both managers rotate. I think we're going to see some rotation from Arsenal. I think we're going to see Matt Turner in goal. I think we're going to see probably Emil Smith-Rowe get a start, try and get his fitness up. Maybe Kivior gets his start.
Yeah.
Maybe we could see Fabio Vieira. I think we could see a bit of a rotated side. I think for City, probably the same. Might see Rico Lewis, who is going under the radar. Is a very, very, very good player, by the way. So I think it'll be interesting to see how much of a risk each manager takes. Or if one manager just goes full strength, fuck you, let's do it. I don't know. It'll be really interesting. But Friday night, big game. I'm not going to predict this one. I'm just going to see what happens because I would love to go far in the FA Cup. I would love to win the FA Cup. It's our trophy. We've won it the most, but I definitely give more of a shit about the Premier League at the moment. So if we have to lose this in order to win the Premier League, deal. Let's do that. Yes, I will take it. So we're going to move on from the FA Cup and we need to preview the Serie A weekend that is before us. And we can only start in one place. Unfortunately, I think it's the last game of the weekend, so you have to wait for it. Serie A are really good at doing this, making you wait. Make you wait. On Sunday night at, of course, 20:45, we have Derby della Sole as Napoli take on Roma. Adam, how do you feel about this one?
I'm looking forward to it because, again, it's going to be contrast of stars here. Mourinho versus Spalletti. I expect Spalletti to get the win over Mourinho and Roma. I think the quality will be there, showing how vast there is a difference between the two clubs at this moment in time. However, I'm expecting Roma to give a bit of a game because I think they will trouble the defensive lines, especially with Dybala and Abraham in rich vein of form as well, it has to be said. I just think defensively, Roma are a bit short when it comes to Kvaratskhelia, Osimhen, and whoever else they decide to play on that right-hand side of that trio. So, yeah, what about you?
I'm just looking at their head-to-head. It's a bit mad. Roma haven't beat Napoli since 2019. Zaniolo, who has got so many mentions in this pod, Zaniolo and Veretout getting the goals. In the last 6 games, Napoli have won 4 of them, and Roma have only scored 2 goals. So Roma's record against Napoli is not great. Last year, Napoli won 1-0 in Rome, and they drew 1-1 at the Diego Armando Maradona. So I think there's only really one winner here based on form, but it is a derby, so you never know. I do like Mourinho and Spalletti's little bromance that they do have, though. They do really like each other, it seems. So I do like that. But I expect Napoli to get the W and keep on marching. Elsewhere in Serie A this weekend, I'm going to kind of quickly take you through the weekend. If there are any games you want to talk about, just shout, Adam. There's Bologna Spezia Friday night or tonight.
No, I mean, don't.
That's fine. Good. I was going to say, oh God. Bologna Spezia tonight at 6:30. And then 6:30. What? And then 9:15, we have Lecce taking on Salernitana. I won't even finish work by that point. 9:15, we have Lecce versus Salernitana in a kind of southern battle, let's say. Empoli versus Torino on Saturday in a mid-table clash. Cremonese hosting Inter. Can they get their first win in Serie A? No. Inter fresh off that defeat to Empoli. I think they're going to be pretty willing and able and ready to put that defeat behind them. Then the late kickoff on Saturday. This could be an ugly one. Atalanta taking on Sampdoria. Sampdoria leaking like a sieve, and Atalanta scoring like we know they love to.
How many goals are we saying? I'm going to put it out there 5.
I'm going to say. No, you know what? I'm just going to price is right here and say 6 just because it's a bit mad. I think it's just a bit madder. But I think Sampdoria get like 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of a mad one, but Atalanta will definitely win. Then early on Sunday, we have Milan versus Sassuolo. Milan, this is your chance. Sassuolo have been terrible. They are only heading in one direction. You have to beat them. You have to beat them. Sassuolo, their form is absolutely
that'll be
woeful.
If they don't, that's a great result for Sassuolo as well, because they are the second most leakiest defense of the recent forms. So, yes, I can only see Milan scraping a 1-0 win, though. I think they will scrape a win, but if they don't, that could be quite bad for Pioli. I think that might start the kind of hammer on his coffin kind of moment, potentially.
It is a big one. That's at 12:30 Central European time. On Sunday, then we have Juventus versus Monza. That's an interesting one. Monza kind of springing a few surprises. Juventus, after that incredible game against Atalanta, will be looking to get another 3 points. And then Sunday, Adam, a game you wanted to kind of talk about, I think. Lazio taking on Fiorentina.
Yeah, I'm just putting it out there because Lazio, after this game, have got to go away to Juventus. So a win here would definitely help cement some distance, and potentially, if they can win or at least get a point against Juventus, I think that really keeps them in the top 4. Because I was looking at the fixtures earlier, Napoli is towards March time, and then in between that, they've got a fairly easy-ish run, shall we say. They've got teams that are in the bottom half of the table to play. So I think these are the big games that they have to make the most of. Fiorentina, not great, it has to be said. We spoke about them, I think, last week around how attacking-wise they're really short at the moment. Italiano, I don't know what the future is for him at Fiorentina. It looks not pretty for him at the moment, it has to be said. I don't know. What's your thoughts on Fiorentina this season?
We've talked about they just can't score. They can't score. I think Italiano, they're not really going to get a better manager than him at the moment. They just need to stick with him, wait for this system to work. They're not in any danger. They're not going to qualify for Europe. Just let this guy, let him build. Just let him build, and he'll get enough points. He'll get you there. He just needs a bit more time. I really think he's such an exciting coach. He's such an exciting coach. I could see him doing things with Fiorentina if he just has that time to get the players he needs. They need a striker that scores. They tried with Jovic and it's just not quite working at the minute. It was a risk that it could have paid off. It really could have paid off, but at the moment it just isn't. And then finally, the last game of the Serie A weekend is Udinese on Monday night, hosting Verona. Fresh from a win last weekend, Verona are going to be looking to trying to get some kind of hold on getting out of the relegation zone. They are currently 5 points behind Sassuolo, but if Sassuolo lose and they win, that is reduced to 2 points. So there is a chance. Guys, we are finished for today. I think that's everything we've covered. That was a long one. There wasn't much football, but we sure made a lot of it. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, follow us on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod, on Instagram at Anglo-Italian Pod. Follow us on TikTok at Anglo-Italian Pod. Find us on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and make sure to like this video. It's all down here. Adam, anything to say before I send our listeners off with the quote that I definitely remembered to do this week?
Certo. That's all I'm going to sign out with. Certo.
Beautiful. We are definitely ready. And of course, the quote, it comes from a press conference with Guardiola talking about a man who has a special place in my heart. He's a supporter. He was a captain there. He loves the club. I remember here when we scored goals, he jumped a lot, except against one team. He was sitting there. It was Arsenal. I said, that guy likes Arsenal. Thanks for listening, guys. We will see you on Monday.
Ciao, ciao.